Today I'm making ham and potato soup. This recipe has been a favorite for years in our home. It is very delicious, very creamy, and satisfying. Today I'm going to show you how easy it is to make, and we're going to start out by looking at the ingredients. We'll be using a 10-pound bag of russet potatoes. We'll need a cup and a half of diced yellow onion, a cup and a half of diced celery, 1 cup of butter, 1 pound of diced ham, 20 cups of water, 16 ounces of heavy whipping cream, 4 cups of whole milk, 2 teaspoons of freshly cracked black pepper, salt, chicken bouillon, and 1 cup of flour. We'll be working with 3 workstations. Our first pot we will cook our potatoes. Our second pot we will do our roux. The third one is a skillet, and here we'll saute the vegetables. Here I have a French fry cutter. This is how we're going to chop the potatoes for uniform pieces and even cooking. And so we'll get started by peeling the potatoes, and I am peeling with a potato peeler in this video. I didn't always used to use a potato peeler. When I was growing up, I used to use a knife to peel potatoes, and I did all of those years never thinking twice about it. But now that I'm older, I try not to do that, and I try to use a potato peeler. And I just want to show you here with the paring knife what I used to do when I was younger and growing up. I would take it and peel it, cutting towards myself, which is very dangerous, and you can cut yourself. You can slice your thumb, you can cut your hand, you can lose control of this knife, and it can turn into a very dangerous situation. Not to mention that you're cutting large pieces of peel off of the potato, which that's not good. You don't want to ever have to do that. But you know, we make excuses for ourselves and say, well, this is what I'm used to and this is how I've always done it. Not safe, guys. You don't want to do this. You want to try to change those habits when and wherever possible. Remember, our kids are watching us and we're setting an example for them, so don't do that. So I am going to show you here, in addition, how thick the skin is that we actually peel off of the potato. Look at that. We're losing all of that potato when we're using a knife, but look at how thin it is when you use a potato peeler. And if you think to yourself that using a knife is faster, well, I'm just going to demonstrate here. I've got a large potato that I'm peeling with a potato peeler, and it's not slower than using a knife. In fact, it's probably just as fast, if not faster, than using a knife. So there you go, all peeled and all done using a potato peeler. And I'm all done with my 10 pounds of potatoes, and I'm ready to get these washed up and cleaned and ready to chop. So here I'm going to wash these one by one. They're dusty and dirty from all of the peeling and everything that they've gone through, so I do need to rinse these and get these cleaned up. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to show you what not to do is put the whole potato in lengthwise, because you'll end up with a long piece of potato. There you go, that's way too long. So now I have to cut these in half, and instead of doing that, I am just going to take each potato and cut it the size that I want these pieces to be. And then I'll take each one of these pieces and run them through the French fry cutter. And there we go, there's one and another, and I'm just going down each potato and cutting it the way I see fit according to the potato. This one I'll have to cut it in 3 pieces, and then just run it through this French fry slicer, and I'm getting them the exact pieces that I want them. And this is important because I do want these potatoes to be approximately the same size, because then they will cook evenly. They will all be done at the same time in a large pot, and that's very important, that they're all a uniform size and that they're going to cook and be done at the same time. So I'll go through all 10 pounds doing this here, and it saves a lot of time and it's a lot easier. So I would recommend getting one of these. They're not that expensive and they're easy to find. So now I'll take these potatoes and put them in a very large pot. These are a lot of potatoes. It's going to make a lot of soup, but I have a big family, so we will go through it in no time. So here we go. We've got the potatoes in the pot with 20 cups of water. I'm going to add 2 cubes of the chicken bouillon, and here I'm going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt to season. I will add more salt later on in the soup, but at this time I'm only adding 1/4 of a teaspoon. I'll give that a stir and get that ready for simmering. Put a lid on it. There we go. And we'll get ready to get started with the vegetables. We'll be using 1½ cups for the onion and 1½ cups for the celery. Here I'm showing you how to cut the celery. I'm cutting it in long strips, and then I'm taking it with my knife and cutting those into small diced pieces until I have enough to fill 1½ cups of diced celery. So there you have it. Here I'm going to start filling my cups, 1½. I actually end up with heaping cups. That means they're overstuffed, and a little left over there on my scraper. And there I have both my onion and my celery, both 1½ cups, and these are ready to be sauteed in the skillet. And that's going to be workstation number 2. But first we're going to take a peek at workstation number 1, where we started our potatoes. Here we have a rolling simmer. The heat is on high here. So now that I've got it simmering, I'm going to turn the heat down and I'm going to let them simmer slowly. I want these to cook slowly. They'll be in the pot probably for another maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to start getting the pepper ready. My pepper mill is empty, so I'm going to actually fill it up here. And there we go. I'm going to put that back together, and I am going to crack 2 teaspoons of black pepper. So I'll do that on this plate here until I have enough to fill 2 teaspoons, and I'll be using this when I get ready to do the roux. So there's 1 teaspoon. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to try to gather another teaspoon here and measure. There we go, and I have a little left over, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that in there. Now we're getting ready to start on workstation number 2, and I have the celery and the onion ready. I've got the ham ready to be sauteed as well, and I'm getting ready with a hot skillet right now, and I will be adding 1 tablespoon of canola oil. There we go, and that is a very hot skillet. And the first thing that's going to go down is the celery. Celery takes a little bit longer to cook than the onion, so that's why I add the celery first. Here I'm going to add another tablespoon of oil because I can tell that it needs it. So total it was 2 tablespoons of canola oil to saute the celery. And I'll work on this for a little while, probably about 5, maybe 7 minutes to get the celery where I want it to be before adding the onion. And once I see that it's cooking down a little bit and getting a good head start, then I'll add the 1½ cups of onion in the same skillet. And at this time I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. I like to add just a tiny bit of salt because that helps to pull the moisture out of the vegetables, which adds more flavor to this saute. And that is essentially what we're doing. We're building layers of flavor. That's the reason why we're doing this in the skillet rather than in the pot of soup, because here these have a chance to begin to develop really good depth of flavor. And in this very skillet, in a minute, once these are done, I will do the ham here as well. So I'm going to take these out right now and just set these on a plate. I don't want these to cook any further, so I won't add the ham at this time. I'm going to do the ham separately, but I will do it in the very same skillet. So I'm going to just add 1 tablespoon of canola oil, and I'm going to add the 1 pound of ham. So each package is 8 ounces, and I purchased it this way. It's already conveniently diced, so that's wonderful, and they're small pieces. So this is how I like to get the ham, already diced for me, and then I just take it out of the package, and I will saute it in the pan as well, again to build that depth of flavor for the soup. So here I'm going to take a peek at workstation number 1 at the potatoes. These are looking like they are ready, so I'm just going to taste them. I'm going to take 1 piece out with a spoon and taste it for myself. If I feel that it is soft and it doesn't taste like a raw potato anymore, I'll take it off the fire, and those are done. Back to the ham here. It is going to cook down and start to brown just a little bit, and it smells really good at this point. I can tell that the ham flavor is developing nicely. It is sizzling and browning, and I'm happy with it at this point. I'm going to let it cook down just a little further because I want to build those layers of flavor. But that's looking pretty good. I think it's ready. So in this same plate, I'm going to scoot the vegetables over, and I'm going to bring the ham onto this plate, and they are going to be set aside. There we go. I'm going to get all of those little bits and get everything, there we go, ready. So these will be about the same amount of vegetables to the diced ham, and I will set these aside and bring those back into the soup at a later step. Now that the potatoes are done, there is one thing I have to do. I am going to separate the broth from the cooked potatoes because I will be needing this broth later on when I go to make the roux. So very carefully, I will take this pot of potatoes and I will separate the broth into another pot. I do it this way. If you want to use a colander or some other way to drain the broth from the potatoes, you can. This is the way I do it. I do it very slowly, very carefully, and this is the method that I prefer. But you can do whatever feels right for you. And I end up with 14 cups of broth. I started out with 20 cups of water when I started with the potatoes, but here I'm going to end up with 14 cups of broth, and the rest of the water is obviously it's absorbed in the potatoes, and in the one pot I do end up with 14 cups of broth. Now I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I will fish out the potatoes that fell out and bring those back to the pot because I really don't want that additional starch in my roux when I go to make my roux. So I will take these potatoes out, put those back in the pot, and that's what I'm doing there. Okay, workstation number 3. This is where we're going to get started on the roux. And I'm getting everything ready because I have to have everything ready, because when that roux comes together, it happens fast and you have to have all of your ingredients right in front of you. So here I'm measuring out the 4 cups of milk to have that ready and all measured out. Okay, and I have my whipping cream close by, and I've got my flour, my cracked pepper, my cup of butter, and my whisk. I have that ready. I also have the vegetables and ham not far away. So here we go. We're going to start workstation number 3 on a light temperature. I will add the butter, making sure it's not too hot. You don't want the butter to burn, so make sure that the temperature is not too high. And you want to see the butter melt. And as soon as it does, you're going to be adding the flour. The 1 cup of flour goes down, and I'm going to start whisking right away. The reason that we do this is to get the flour to begin to saute in the butter. This is going to bring out a nutty flavor from the flour. It is going to cook out the raw flour flavor, and I will actually be doing this whisking for about an entire minute. I speed up the speed on the video here, but it usually takes about 1 full minute of whisking, and I am letting the flour come into contact with the hot butter, and it is going to change color. It will get a little bit darker, so the tan color starts to get more tan and more tan, and then when I feel that I'm satisfied with the color and I think it's cooked down enough and I've gotten the raw flavor out of there, this is when I'm going to be adding the 2 teaspoons of cracked black pepper. And the reason that I do that here is because I want that pepper to infuse with the flour. And I don't leave it on the fire for too long. I don't leave it on the heat too long, the pepper. I don't want it to burn or anything, but I do want it to infuse. So very rapidly, I give that a good whisk, and then I start to add the milk right away. Now when you add that milk, you have to be ready to start whisking, and don't stop whisking because this roux will get thick very fast on you. So you have to be ready and be whisking and pouring at the same time. And also I will turn the temperature up a little bit at this point, and that's what I'm doing right there, because the milk is cold and it's going to change the temperature, but I want the heat on this roux to stay hot, so that's why I turn up the heat. And I add the rest of the milk, and it's going to thicken very rapidly. And it's just as soon as I start to see that thickening happening, this is when the broth from the potatoes is going to be added. So I'm going to put it on a higher speed here because it takes a few minutes to get this to totally come to the desired thickness that I want it to be. And once I see that, then I will begin to add the broth from where I cooked the potatoes. This is when I separated the broth from the potatoes. And I usually will get help. My husband usually helps me with the pot, and he'll bring that into the roux very slowly while I continue to whisk. I can't do this myself because the other pot of broth is very heavy and I can't lift it and whisk at the same time. But if you can get someone to help you drop the rest of that broth in there, that would be great. And if not, you can separate that broth into smaller cup sizes, maybe 4 cup sizes, and have all of that ready so you can do it with one hand and whisk with the other. Now I'm going to taste it. So at this point I will be adding another 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and that's going to go down. There we go, and get that incorporated at this point, and I will continue to whisk and bring this up to a simmer. And there we go. It takes a little while, but I'll watch it carefully, making sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom, of course. And you know, we have milk in there, so we don't want it to cook too much. There we go. It's starting to simmer. You can see that there. I'm pointing to the simmering that's starting to happen. I don't want it to stay on this simmer for too long. I want to, at this point, add the vegetables right into the soup. This is where the celery and the ham come back into the picture. There we go. It's simmering nicely now. Down go these vegetables with all of their flavor, and those get added to the soup at this point. So all of these wonderful flavors are coming together now, and I will let that start to come together and thicken just a little bit. It's simmering again. Do you see that simmer? This is when the potatoes come in. These potatoes, basically all the broth has been taken out and separated, so these are just potatoes, no broth. But I'll scoop these out with a spoon very carefully, making sure not to, get them to break or anything. Just being really careful with these and adding them spoonful by spoonful. There we go. A lot of potatoes, and this soup is coming together now. Okay, so these will come to a simmer. It won't take long from this point. We're almost done with this soup. It's not going to take but a few minutes to come to a simmer. And the very last ingredient, 16 ounces of heavy whipping cream, is going down at this point. Give it a nice shake, and there it is. 16 ounces of this wonderful, creamy, heavy whipping cream at the last part of this soup coming together. And this adds richness and a delicious flavor. And we will bring it to a very light simmer. And once you see that simmer, you probably won't have it on there for a minute or two, and then it'll be ready to come off of the heat. So I'm trying to zoom in here, showing you that there are some parts where it's simmering. And when you see that, keep stirring the pot. Make sure that it's not going to stick to the bottom. You cannot walk away from this soup. You want to stay here for the next couple of minutes. There we go. I see the simmer, and I'm giving it a stir. I don't want it to stick to the bottom. I'm taking really good care of this soup at this point. It's just moments before it comes off of the heat. There we go. Nice simmer. Once I see that, I know that we're done. Off the fire it goes. I add a lid and I leave it here for 1 hour to cool and bloom. Now I'm going to show you some of the toppings that are our favorite toppings for this soup. I've got sharp cheddar, finely shredded cheese, oyster crackers, our favorite, hot sauce, and Hawaiian rolls. Okay, and I'm just going to add these to a serving bowl. The oyster crackers and the sharp cheddar cheese in a bowl. And these are going to go on the table for everyone to serve themselves al gusto, or as desired. There I've got a serving spoon and I've got some tongs for the cheese, and these sauces will go on the table just like that, along with the Hawaiian rolls. Okay, we're ready to serve the soup, and I'll show you how I do it. So it goes in a bowl, making sure that I add some soup. I'm going to add some my favorite hot sauce to the top, a generous serving of cheddar cheese. There we go. I'm going to top it with some oyster crackers. Those are very delicious with this soup. And then I'm going to make sure that I grab one of those Hawaiian rolls that are sweet and delicious. The rolls are so good in this soup. Add your soup spoon and you're ready to go. Sometimes I like to put the soup on top of a dinner plate so that my roll can sit on the dinner plate with the same toppings, the cheddar cheese, the hot sauce, the oyster crackers, and for this one I'm going to add an extra Hawaiian roll. And there you have it. There is the ham and potato soup. It's delicious and creamy and satisfying and completely homemade. And like they say in Spanish, buen provecho. Enjoy.